Hello, grade 8 teachers. Today we're going to look at 8.EE.2.5. We're going to read the standard, unpack it a little bit, talk about what you could be doing in the classroom, as well as what the students should be doing, and anticipate some misconceptions, and think of ways to address those misconceptions or use them for instruction. So let's go ahead and get started. 8.EE.2.5 reads, graph proportional relationships interpreting the unit rate as the slope of the graph. Compare two different proportional relationships represented in different ways. For example, compare a distance-time graph to a distance-time equation to determine which of the two moving objects has greater speed. So when we unpack that, students need to build on their work from grade 6 with unit rates, and their work in grade 7 with proportional relationships to compare graphs, tables, equations of linear and proportional relationships. Students identify the unit rate as the slope in graphs, tables, and equations to compare proportional relationships presented in different representations. So when looking at some things the teacher could be doing, first is just present a single graph proportional relationship to the class to facilitate some discussion about unit rate using the background knowledge from grade 6 and interpret that rate as the slope of the line. That's the work of grade 8. And so here you just have a quick relationship of boxes of cookies on the x-axis to the sales in dollars. And so we definitely want them to make sense of that unit rate. And so in grade 7, they really had to make sense of the point when x is 1, the y coordinate. And so we really emphasize this point here. And so that's one of the 7 RP standards there. And so ratio and proportion. So they explicitly call out making sense of the unit rate. And so here, when x is 1 box of cookies, it's up 1, 2, 3, so $3. And so that point, our unit rate of 1 box of cookies is $3 is really important. So I just want to document that over there. Then you also need to present the students with a second related proportional relationship written in a different form. And so if we had something like a table, and so we could have, let me see if I can zoom out here. So I also could present just this table here. So you can present them side by side. And so in the table, we're looking at candy bars and sales. And notice over here, if I can zoom in just a little, I chose not to go just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think sometimes we do that too much. And so really wanted to work to get that unit rate from the table. So I did not provide when x equals 1. I believe that's the work of the student. And so now we have a table with candy bars and sales. We have a graph of cookies, boxes of cookies and sales, and we can ask some questions like what's happening in each situation? How are they the same? How are they different? How can we tell? What about the slopes? What do they tell us? What can help you compare the slopes? And so again, getting back to that notion of comparing those unit rates, the change over 1, really goes into that notion of slope. And so we'd want them to determine the unit rate over here as well. We also want to provide opportunities for students to compare proportional relationships and write conclusions based on precise math vocabulary. So again, opportunity for math practice 6 there with using that precise language. So now looking at what the students should be doing. So some things you could do to set up and what we want the students to do during that time. And so make use of the structure of the representations to compare different representations. And so again, the structure of the graph, the structure of the table, the structure of an equation, the verbal description. And so that's a math practice 7 opportunity where students choose which representations help them compare the relationship easier. We also want them to compare proportional relationships written in different forms, those graphs, tables, equations, verbal descriptions, and explain comparisons in writing using clear, precise math language. Those comparisons will include slope interpreted in the context of those relationships. So we're thinking of some misconceptions students might have. An error that might occur is students get overwhelmed when they're presented with a lot of information at once. And so if they do have a table and a graph, or a table equation, a graph equation, whatever, maybe you have them focus working with one relationship at a time and interpreting that relationship and, pulling out the unit rate and things like that, and then move on to the other, then make the comparison. Graphing might be difficult for some students, so make sure you supply like graph paper or graphing technology like Desmos so they can really work on the interpreting piece We're not worried so much in the standards if they can physically graph, but they need to be able to interpret what the graph means. And then in general, use context familiar to them. This just makes the information more accessible so students can better understand and interpret those proportional relationships. That's it for this standard, 8.EE.2.5. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me or your regional specialist, and thank you for making PascoMath more awesome.